exactly to the right point here, the dark side of the moon project, right? So what are they doing here? They want to rewrite and reimagine the hidden history or the her story of female astronauts. This is the first woman that went to space in 1963. And by doing so, by rewriting and reimagining using the arts and using oral history interviews and characterization, for example, what do? We create an alternative source of history, don't we? And how do you think we might go about interviewing women astronauts? What would you ask them if you were interviewing them? Doesn't matter if it's right or wrong, but anything that comes to mind? Maybe? Anything? Yeah?
Their perspective as a female being an astronaut and cosmonaut too. Does it affect like females more to go up in space? But I mean, they're responsible for having children and that and stuff. So like you can't alter that sort of thing. And it's like the fact that when you think of an astronaut or cosmonaut, you think of a male going up there and how they kind of feel about also being up there, like, but not being acknowledged for what they've done.
Yeah. So all of that is very helpful. There are ways to ask the question that isn't so maybe precise, but more open-ended, because again, we can't necessarily assume that every single woman had the same experience, right? We have seen that each one of us has a unique story, and just those two stories that we listen to. So let's talk about the methodology then now. This is the right moment, and then I get you to do some interviews together. So let's look at the interview skills and then we look at the research. So these are the kind of things we do in oral history, okay? And in a minute, I'm going to break you up in groups and you're going to practice doing some interviews again. So what we say that is a good practice of interviewing is that we are clear. So we don't ask, double questions. If you listen back to any interviews, when somebody's asked a double question, two questions in one, they get very confused. They don't know which one they should answer. And usually the interviewer, remember, has more power than the interviewee by virtue of having, the audio recorder or the camera, they're leading, they're sort of, more powerful than the person being interviewed. Therefore, the interviewee really wants to be led. And this is why we have to be very careful the way we do it. So, active listening from the point of view of the interviewee. So, I'll give you an example. You could be interviewing somebody and you keep on asking them about a particular event they've experienced, and they keep going back to the memory of somebody they met at that particular event. And you're not hearing it. They mentioned that person 3 times. That in itself is a clue, right? You need to go back, rephrase your line of questioning and follow up from what she's telling you or he's telling you. Yeah? Empathy, you need to care. You need to actually like these people. Or at least pretend that you do. Because if you don't, you probably get a very bad interview. And why do you think we ask open questions?
Because you get more information out of it. You don't ask closed questions, it's only yes or no.
Precisely. There's also something else. You get more information, but also, what happens?
Go into
Talk about?
More things than just information.
Very good, yes. So you get a bigger narrative, yes.
Like the interview is not actually meant to play a big part in the actual interview, so the interviewee has to take any pictures.
Yes, so what we're doing, we're bringing the interviewee in the center stage of the telling. By letting them shape what comes out, give them a voice, right? That's the purpose. It's not just about interviewing them, like I said earlier, but it's about enabling them to tell the story in their own terms. So, obviously you have an agenda. I want to know who you are. Why did you decide to become a female astronaut? What were your experiences? What happened when you first became one? What did you do? Blah, blah, blah. But then you might find that that female astronaut wants to start telling you a story from a different point of your agenda. That's fine. You drop what you're supposed to do and you just tune in, right? That's very important. That's a skill that you get as you practice. I mentioned enabling and allowing for silences. Why do you think allowing for silences is important? Yeah.
Because so they're saying something that's kind of it's emotional because value to them, then they might need, yeah, they might have to need some time to kind of get their answer together.
Yes, very good.
It's also like letting people who are listening to it think about what's actually happening and stuff.
Very good. Yes, so we got space to, process emotions, space to think about anything else that might come to mind because of a question, and
That's more of a natural element to it. It's not like a free person. When you're talking to someone, normally you rush everything into amount of time as if you only have half an hour to talk to them. You have to speak used to.
very good, very good. Yeah.
Like, it's not an interrogation, it's a conversation.
Yes, that's interesting. Yeah. So you don't want to rush them. So that interview with Giovanni, the first one we listened to, was a 4-hour interview. You listened to 4 minutes there, but I said that I listened for 4 hours, right? So just to give you an idea. But he said to me he'd been waiting for somebody to come at his door because he had a story to tell. So he was prepared and he had to tell his entire story in one go. So that's what you have to be willing to do. Have time and care to stay there and not interrupt them because oh no, you have to go and do something else. So you have to be prepared that it might take a while. Yes. So let's think about this. Silences, right? You said conversation. Now, we talked about her story, feminism, right? We haven't talked so much in depth about feminism, but since this project is about giving a voice back to women in history that we denied the space, we should talk about oral history. Oral history in itself, the fact that we sit and have an interview across a table, it's a very patriarchal sort of setup, isn't it? Right? Job interview. I'm sitting here, you're sitting there, there is a chair, I'm supposed to be dressed in a particular way and act in a particular way. Oral history isn't really that, but of course, most of the people that publish in the oral history journal and write the books are men as well. Yes, there are some women, but... So, feminist oral historians have been saying, actually, it's all well and good that we should be very objective and very detached, and you stand there and I stand here and I interview you, but they say it's more like a conversation. If you had it in a feminist way, you would allow for the conversation. So, traditional oral history would say, if an interviewee asks you a question, right? So I come into your home, I sit there and I ask your mom and dad their own life stories, right? I think they have a right to ask a question about my life, right? Usually they say, in the theory, don't. Say, okay, I'll answer later because the recording is not about you. But the feminist oral historians say, well, no, actually, you do need to talk about yourself a little bit and let that conversation flow. It doesn't mean that you're just throwing back and forth your own story, but it's okay to hear the voice of the interviewer. It's okay to acknowledge you're there. And also it's fair that the interviewee should know something about it, right? Otherwise, we reproduce another journalistic, detached, and very sort of skewed view of the past. Does that make sense? Yeah? Very good. So, minimizing your presence. So you might be turning up and you have this lovely lady with a massive necklace and she's going like that and you're going like this and it makes a racket in the recording, so don't. You've got a nice necklace, take it off before you do. Also, if you're feeling nervous, we have a tendency to go like this with paper, to faff with the mic or the equipment, but I think in this project you have somebody sorting out the video camera stuff. But anyway, if you were doing a project with your school, minimizing your presence makes the interviewee more relaxed. So that you need to think about. So things not to do, tight interview questions. What do I mean by that?
Very specific question to answer, so you're basically guessing what you want out of them. So a very closed, not really closed questions, but so the answers aren't very varied.
Yeah, like when did you marry or something, or did you marry or something that is a bit inappropriate, maybe it doesn't really make sense in the context of it, yeah. Something that maybe should come out naturally in an interview, that's right. Or you mustn't, that mustn't upset you or something, you make it very tight. So it's a bit like a closed question, but it's also a loaded one, and here we got that. Double questions, we know, leading questions. Anyone can give me an example of a leading question? No? Do you know what I mean by that? No? So, how much do you think the prices are going up next year? Will the prices go up next year? One question implies that the prices will go up, the other one doesn't. So, okay, so I'm sitting there, I'm interviewing somebody and I think, oh, it must have been really hard coming over here with one suitcase made of cardboard. And this actually happened there. Sicilian man that came to work in the glass house industry in the 1950s in the Lee Valley, which today is still producing the tomatoes and the peppers that you eat in your home, from the supermarket. They came over here with a cardboard package, But you don't ask them, it must have been really hard, was it hard? No, you say, so what was it like when you came over? Can you describe the journey? So of course you have a question in your mind that has a particular view to it. What you're doing, you're changing that in your mind to an open questions. How, why, what? Yeah? So now we're going to do a little practice. We talked about not obsessing with the equipment. Interrupting, this makes perfect sense, but we do it all the time, don't we? We finish a sentence for someone else. We remember a really important question, we cut through, and then they were just saying something really amazing. You're like, oh no! Because on audio and video is a little bit simpler, but audio, the two sound waves overlap, you cannot remove the voice of the interviewer, right? So let them talk as much and only really bring your own voice in when there is a natural silence or a pause, which we talked about already. Okay? Imposing your own views, right? Again, here, this can be very typical when you're speaking to individuals that you don't understand their culture or their lives or something, right? Speaking too much, judging and patronizing, you'll be surprised how much it actually happens in oral history interviews, yeah. Something else that is not on here, we talk about in a minute, it's jargon. If you're going to go and interview somebody about the history of organ making in Italy, or the history of making clothes in the Pakistani community or the Bengali community in East London, you need to know a little bit about their jobs, don't you? What were the terms? What machines did they use? So, being prepared, it's almost more important than, even the kind of questions that you ask, because you need to know your subject, don't you? You can't just turn up and not know your subject. So it's really, really important. Now, so what I wanted to show you very quickly is going to be very fast. So, if you have been participating in the project, The Dark Side of the Moon, about female astronauts, you would have looked at how to prepare for an interview. So I've got this very nice slides and I'll show it to you. Any topic whatsoever, what do you do if you want to research it? You look at things that are relevant. In this case, you're looking at why women astronauts, women that wanted to become astronauts found this so difficult, right? We know there was only 10% of all the astronauts that were out in space have been women. So we look at the women liberation movement, obviously, because we can find out why were women fighting for oppression. We talked about this one at the beginning, right? Second part, you look at research publications and journals. You probably know there's quite a lot of stuff online now. You can literally go on the internet, everything is right there. And of course there's a book called Almost Astronauts. It's about 13 women that tried very hard to break into becoming astronauts and they did not. And these were of course oral histories. The book was published in 2005. Okay? And of course you can look at archives. I know we're talking about hidden stories, but there was always material in the archives, even about the migrants and refugee communities, and of course the astronauts. We got a NASA historical archive. I think it's a very good source of indication to find out about the story. Twitter, social media, you can find out about all sorts of topics today about that. And of course you need to understand the basic knowledge and context of a life read, which we mentioned earlier, right? The trade, understanding the jargons and that kind of thing that you might need. So I hope you've enjoyed it today, and that one day you go and you